within here we've talked primarily about what we do with young puppies is almost all the giving and withholding of rewards, right? And so in most cases with puppies, we're trying to build not only an attitude about training and an attitude about us, a relationship with us, but they also don't know anything. And in dog training, one of the most important principles in the use of pressure, and these days we have people putting themselves in certain sorts of training camps, and the reward-based people think that anybody that uses pressure is evil. The escape and avoidance thing, people think anybody who uses a clicker is a sissy or whatever, right? And people get really devoted to a certain aspect of training. And one of the knocks on pressure-based training, the use of escape and avoidance training and pressure in our dog training, is that you'll damage your relationship. You can damage the dog's ability to work independently. There's all kinds of things, and there's a fairness component to this. Ultimately, the way punishment works is the dog has to know what to do to make that not happen again. They have to know what they do, clearly know what they need to do to avoid that consequence. And if the dog can very clearly figure out exactly what they need to do to avoid that, then punishment works great. If the dog can't figure it out, then punishment creates stress. It's just like us, right? There are lots of things in our lives that have happened to us that are unpleasant. But if we know what we need to do to avoid them, we have no problem with them. Like, I've been burned while cooking, right? Everybody has. You burned your hand on the stove, you burned your hand on a pot handle, whatever, right? Am I afraid of cooking? Do I stay away from the stove? No, because I'm pretty sure what I have to do to not make that happen in the future. So that's within my control. So it doesn't make me anxious. But if I couldn't figure that out, if every time I went over to the stove it did something different, sometimes the knobs were hot and the burners were cold, sometimes vice versa, sometimes a cooking pot was cold and sometimes the cooking pot was hot, you wouldn't go near the damn thing. You're like, I cannot figure out how this thing works, it changes up on me all the time. And that's definitely the case. There's actually a concept in psychology called perceived control of aversive experiences, right? And they do studies in psychology departments where they have students and they use electroshock on them and they give them a series of questions. And if they know what the answers are, then they perceive that it's in their control. And even if it's not in their control, but in their mind it's in their control, then they have a different physiological response to the same electrical shock than if they felt it was out of their control. The same electrical shock actually creates a different physiological experience. Their heart rate is higher, their blood pressure is higher, their cortisol levels are higher if they think it's out of their control. If they think it's in their control, they can shock themselves all day long. They can deliberately answer wrong, and they have less of a stress than if it's out of their control in their mind. And this is it in dog training in a nutshell. Anybody that's trained dogs a lot knows this to be true. If the dog feels in control of those aversive experiences, and I think they know what they need to do, then if I correct them, they're less stressed than you correcting a dog that can't figure out what the heck it's being corrected for and how it's going to make that stop. And so with puppies, they don't know anything, ultimately. And so me correcting them for most things isn't fair, and it's going to cause anxiety and stress and damage to our relationship.